Have you ever looked at your life and quietly asked God, why is everything falling apart? I've been praying, I've been waiting, but nothing seems to be changing. If you've ever felt that way, you're not alone. Some of God's greatest miracles didn't begin with victory. They began with silence, with confusion, with seasons that made no sense. Joseph was betrayed before he was promoted. Moses spent years in the wilderness before leading a nation. David was hunted before he wore the crown. And Jesus himself endured the cross before the resurrection. The world often sees suffering as the end of the story. But God often uses suffering as the beginning of a miracle. What if the doors that closed in your life weren't meant to destroy you, but to redirect you? What if the delay you've been frustrated by is actually God's protection? And what if, right now, without realizing it, you're already walking through the season that comes before a breakthrough? In today's video, we'll explore 7 powerful signs that God may be preparing you for a miracle. Some of these signs may surprise you, and by the end of this video, you may begin to see your current struggles through completely different eyes. So stay with me until the end, because the 7th sign is often the one people misunderstand the most. Sign 1. Everything feels like it's falling apart at first. This doesn't seem like a sign of blessing. It feels like failure. Plans collapse. Relationships change. Opportunities disappear. The future becomes uncertain. But throughout Scripture, God often allows old foundations to break before he builds something stronger. Think about Abraham. God asked him to leave everything familiar before revealing the promised land. Think about Gideon. Before victory, his army became smaller, not larger. God removed what human strength depended on so his power could be clearly seen. Sometimes we hold so tightly to our own plans that God has to remove them before we can receive his better plan. This doesn't mean every hardship comes directly from God. Life includes suffering, human choices, and natural difficulties. But God can work through those hardships to shape us and accomplish his purposes, as Romans 8:28 reminds us. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. If everything around you feels unstable, don't assume God has abandoned you. He may be preparing the ground for something you cannot yet see. Sign 2. God is changing your heart before he changes your circumstances. Many people pray for God to change their situation, but God often chooses to change them first. Why? Because the greatest miracle isn't always a new job, a restored relationship, or financial breakthrough. Sometimes, the greatest miracle is becoming the person God created you to be. Think about Peter. Before he became the bold disciple who preached to thousands, he had to experience failure. He denied Jesus 3 times. He was ashamed, broken, filled with regret. From a human perspective, Peter looked like someone who had failed God. But from God's perspective, Peter was being prepared. His pride had to be replaced with humility. His fear had to be replaced with faith. His dependence on himself had to become dependence on God. Perhaps you've noticed something changing inside you recently. You no longer chase the things that once seemed so important. Your priorities are different. You find yourself praying more than complaining. You seek peace instead of proving yourself. These aren't signs that you've lost something. They're signs that God is reshaping your heart. Because when God prepares you for a miracle, he doesn't simply change your life. He changes the person who will live that new life. As Ezekiel 36:26 says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. If your heart is changing, don't resist it. God may be preparing you for something greater than you imagined. Sign 3. Closed doors. Keep appearing few things are more frustrating than praying for an opportunity, only to watch it disappear. Maybe the job didn't work out. Maybe the relationship ended. Maybe the plan you worked so hard for suddenly fell apart. At first, it feels like rejection. But sometimes, what feels like rejection is actually divine protection. Imagine if Joseph had never been sold into Egypt. He would never have become the man God used to save countless lives during the famine. Imagine if Moses had stayed comfortably in Pharaoh's palace. He might never have discovered God's calling in the wilderness. Closed doors often redirect us toward doors we never would have chosen ourselves. The truth is, we usually ask God to bless our plans. But God is far more interested in leading us into his plan. And his plan is always shaped by wisdom, not by our limited understanding. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. If a door has recently closed in your life, don't rush to believe that God has forgotten you. Sometimes the closed door is not punishment, it's protection. And sometimes the greatest miracle begins the moment you stop forcing a door that God never intended you to walk through. So far, we've seen that God often prepares us through broken plans, transformed hearts, and closed doors. But the next sign is perhaps the hardest one to accept, because it feels like God has gone completely silent. Yet throughout Scripture, silence has often come just before God moves in extraordinary ways. Sign hinges 4. God feels silent perhaps. This is the most painful season of all. You've prayed, you've waited, you've cried, you've trusted. Yet heaven seems silent. No answers, no clear direction, no visible change. If you're in that season today, remember this. God's silence does not mean God's absence. There were hundreds of years between the Old Testament and the birth of Jesus. To many people, it must have seemed as though God had stopped speaking. But behind the scenes, he was preparing the greatest miracle the world would ever witness. Likewise, Lazarus lay in the tomb for 4 days before Jesus arrived. To everyone watching, it looked too late. The sisters believed all hope was gone. Yet Jesus declared, "I am the resurrection and the life." Sometimes God doesn't arrive according to our schedule. He arrives according to his perfect timing. Because his goal isn't simply to solve our problems. His goal is to strengthen our faith. Isaiah 40:31 reminds us, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength." Waiting is never easy, but waiting with faith transforms us. So if heaven feels quiet, don't mistake silence for abandonment. God may be working in ways your eyes cannot yet see. Some of his greatest works happen long before we ever recognize them. Sign 5. Your faith is being tested. No one enjoys being tested, yet every person God used in a powerful way experienced seasons where their faith was stretched beyond what seemed possible. Abraham waited decades for the son God had promised. Noah built an ark before a single drop of rain had fallen. Joshua marched around Jericho for days without seeing the walls move. Imagine how foolish they must have appeared to everyone around them. But they kept obeying, not because they understood everything, but because they trusted the one who did. Your faith is proven not when everything is going well. It's proven when you continue trusting God even when nothing around you makes sense. James 1:3 tells us, "Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Maybe you've been asking, "God, why is this taking so long?" Perhaps the better question is, "God, what are you teaching me while I wait?" Because every test carries a purpose. Every challenge develops endurance, and every season of faithful obedience prepares you for greater responsibility. Don't let temporary disappointment convince you that God has forgotten his promises. He has not. His timing is perfect, and his promises remain true, even when your circumstances suggest otherwise. We've now seen 5 signs that God may be preparing you for a miracle. But the final 2 signs are the most encouraging of all. They reveal what often begins to happen just before God opens a new chapter in your life. And the 7th sign has changed the way many believers understand difficult seasons forever. Sign 6. God begins removing certain people. From your life, one of the hardest seasons you'll ever experience is watching people walk away. Sometimes it's a friendship that slowly fades. Sometimes it's a relationship you thought would last forever. Sometimes it's people who stop believing in you. At first, it feels like loss. It hurts. You question yourself. You wonder if you did something wrong. But throughout the Bible, God often separated his people before leading them into a new season. Before Abraham stepped into God's promise, he was called to leave his homeland and everything familiar. Before David became king, he spent years away from the palace, misunderstood and pursued by those who feared his future. Even Jesus experienced betrayal from someone within his closest circle. Not every separation is a punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. There are seasons when God removes distractions so you can focus on your purpose. There are relationships that were only meant for one chapter of your life, not the entire story. That doesn't mean we should become bitter or stop loving others. Instead, we can choose forgiveness, pray for those who leave, and trust God with the future. If certain people have recently disappeared from your life, don't immediately assume you've lost something valuable. You may simply be making room for what God has already prepared. Ecclesiastes 3 reminds us that there is a time for every purpose under heaven. Some people are part of your journey, others are part of your lesson, and God knows the difference. Sign S7. You feel a new sense of peace. Even before anything changes, this may be the greatest sign of all. Nothing around you has changed. The bills are still there. The challenges remain. The unanswered prayers haven't disappeared. Yet somehow, your heart is no longer filled with panic. Instead, you begin to experience a peace that doesn't make sense. This is the kind of peace Jesus spoke about when he said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives." The world believes peace comes after problems disappear. God often gives peace before the breakthrough arrives. Why? Because real peace is not found in perfect circumstances. It is found in God's presence. When you begin trusting him completely, fear slowly loses its grip. Anxiety no longer controls every decision. Hope begins replacing despair. And even though you don't know exactly how everything will work out, you know who is walking with you. That kind of peace cannot be manufactured. It is a gift from God. And very often, it appears just before a new chapter begins. If you recognized one or more of these 7 signs in your own life today, take heart. Your current season does not define your future. God is still working even when you cannot see him. Remember these 7 signs. Everything feels like it's falling apart. God is changing your heart. Closed doors keep appearing. God feels silent. Your faith is being tested. Certain people are leaving your life. God is giving you supernatural peace. These signs are not guarantees that a specific miracle will happen on a specific timeline. But throughout Scripture, we see that God often uses seasons like these to grow his people, deepen their faith, and prepare them for what comes next. So don't give up. Keep praying, keep trusting, keep walking by faith, even when you cannot yet see the destination, because God's timing is always perfect. If this message encouraged you today, let us know in the comments. I trust God's timing. We would love to pray for you. And if you'd like more Bible-based messages that strengthen your faith and bring hope during difficult seasons, consider subscribing and joining our community. May God bless you, strengthen you, and fill your heart with his peace. Until next time, remember, God's delays are never God's denial.